So last week I talked about how to get to the first jhana. You've got to get yourself settled. You've got to you've got to generate access concentration, which may take a while. There'll be distractions. Label the distraction, relax, and come back. My favorite label is story. I'm distracted. I see I'm telling myself a story, and I just go story, and it goes away. Sometimes I'm telling myself a story about something I want to get, sometimes about something that shouldn't be happening. Sometimes I'm telling myself a story because I'm bored with my breath and I just want better entertainment and I'm a good storyteller. So, story, and it's gone. But eventually the mind settles in and I'm not getting distracted. I'm knowing each in breath and out breath if I'm doing mindfulness of breathing. And I stay there for a while. This is access concentration. And then I shift my attention to a pleasant sensation and do nothing else. And this focus on the pleasant sensation has the effect of generating a feedback loop of pleasure, which eventually turns into the first jhana. And I'll read you what the Buddha has to say about the first jhana. This is from the second discourse in the long discourses, the Samanyapala Sutta, the discourse on the fruits of the spiritual life. Quite secluded from sense pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states. Okay, that's the abandoning of the hindrances, the getting past the distractions, basically. You've got to abandon the hindrances temporarily. So this what the seclusion is. One enters and remains in the first jhana, which is accompanied by thinking and examining, and is filled with rapture and happiness born of seclusion. One enters and dwells in the first jhana. So there's the actual entering of the jhana, and then there's the stabilizing it so that it lasts for a while. Okay? Which is accompanied by, well, I said thinking and examining. The Pali words are vitakka and vichara. Vitakka means thinking, and vichara means examining or pondering. Unfortunately, in later Buddhism, those words, only in the context of the jhanas, got changed to initial attention and sustained attention on the meditation object. The Buddha would be shocked. I have done research on all the places in the suttas where vitakka shows up, and there are 979 locations. All right. So it's an important word and it means thinking always. I looked through to see could I find any place where Sujato, I was looking at his translations, as placing the mind instead of thinking, and doesn't have it keeping connected, which is his translation of examining, and it's not related to the first jhana or the second jhana. And I found all of them zero. Okay. Although you may hear that it's initial and sustained attention to the meditation object, and you do have to do that, no doubt about it, but that's not what these words mean. Okay? I suspect the reason for the change is that as time went on, the understanding of the level of concentration that you need to call it a jhana kept increasing. And then they couldn't have thinking. With this level of concentration, you couldn't have any thinking and examining. They had to come up with something else to explain what was there. So they just took something that you did have, changed the meaning of the words only in the jhana instance and stuck that in there. Not helpful. When you're in the first jhana, your mind is not really deeply connected. It's like, oh, wow, this is intense. because the next thing it says is the state is filled with rapture and happiness born of seclusion. Rapture is piti and happiness is sukha. And suddenly you've got all this excess energy, the piti, and it's like, wow, oh, this is intense. What's going on here? Is this has got to be the first jhana? Yeah, I'm sure it's the first jhana. Couldn't be, yeah, whatever. You're commenting on it and you're thinking about it. Now, it's true, it's a little bit unstable, and so you do have to keep putting your attention back on it and not get lost in it. But basically, what's happened is that you've arrived in a state where the PT comes up and predominates, and you have all this physical energy, and there's some background happiness, and you're commenting on the experience. That's the first jhana. It says one drenches deep, saturates and suffuses one's body with this rapture and happiness born of seclusion, though there is no part of one's entire body not suffused by rapture and happiness. Okay, this is an advanced practice. The first thing to do is get to the first jhana once. Then is to get there the second time, which might be a little more difficult because you know it's there and you want it. Okay, so don't let the wanting get in the way. And then to get in on a regular basis. All right. When you first get in, it may be sort of the upper torso, neck, head, maybe the whole spine, probably not the whole body. Now, some people, when they get to the first jhana first time, yeah, it's a whole body experience. But the majority of people, it's upper body, particularly upper torso, neck, head, and maybe the spine. If you're good at the first jhana, then it's possible to put your attention where it feels strongest, which is probably going to be the head area, and then move your attention to some place where you don't seem to have any piti or sukha, like the arm. You're not trying to move piti, you're just moving your attention, but the piti will follow. And then you do the other arm and the lower torso and one leg and the other leg, and you've gotten the drench, steep, saturate, suffuse. But I'm going to say this over again one more time redundantly. It's an advanced practice. Get good at getting in and stabilizing what's there. Right? We have a simile. Suppose a skilled bath attendant or his apprentice were to pour soap flakes into a metal basin, sprinkle them with water, and knead them into a ball so that the ball of soap flakes would be pervaded by moisture, encompassed by moisture, suffused with moisture inside and out, and yet would not trickle. In the same way, one drenches deep, saturates, and suffuses one's body with the rapture and happiness born of seclusion, so that there is no part of one's body not suffused by rapture and happiness. So this gives us an idea of what soap was like at the time of the Buddha. You didn't go to the store and buy a bar of soap. You got your skilled bath attendant to take a metal basin and pour in the right amount of soap flakes and then the right amount of water and then mix it together until you have a homogeneous ball of soap. The mixing is kind of frenetic. The energy of the first jhana is very frenetic. Okay, so that's really what's going on. You're dealing with all this energy. And then when you're really good at it, the water totally permeates the soap flakes and your piti and sukha totally permeate your body. Notice the body is mentioned here, and you know it's totally permeated with piti and sukha. There is still bodily awareness. Unlike in the Visuddhimagga, the later commentary, no bodily awareness there. You're just checked out. But here in the suttas is very definitely bodily awareness. Okay? Yeah, you get concentrated enough, you put your attention on a pleasant sensation, the first jhana arises. The intensity level can vary quite a bit, not per person, but over a group of people. Some people will get it so intense it's like sticking the finger in the electrical socket, blowing the top of your head off. Other people just get, oh, yeah, this is kind of nice. The PT can show up as movement or as heat or as both. Usually it comes as one or the other. Doesn't matter. And the sukha is the emotional sense of joy or happiness, depending on how you interpret it. But it's a positive mental state. If it's mild, you could stay in the state for 5 to 10 minutes. I'd say beyond 10 minutes is not useful. If it's intense, you would stay not as long. If it's pretty intense, maybe you stay a couple minutes. If it's very intense, maybe you only stay 30 seconds. If it's just way too much, maybe you only stay 10 seconds. And then the thing to do is to move on to the second jhana. The trick for moving on when you're ready is to take a deep breath and really let the energy out. Last week, I said that when you're getting to access concentration and your breath gets shallow, don't take a deep breath because it takes you away from the jhana. Yeah. Now that you want to go away from the first jhana, take a deep breath and on the exhale, just really let the energy out. That will calm the PT. This enables you to do a foreground background shift. If this is the PT and this is the sukha, then you take the deep breath and all of it calms down, but now the sukha is more prominent than the PT. PT is still in the background. Focus on the sukha. That's how you move from the first jhana to the second. I'll read you what the Buddha has to say. Further, with the subsiding of thinking and examining, one enters and dwells in the second jhana, which is accompanied by inner tranquility and unification of mind, is without thinking and examining, and is filled with rapture and happiness born of concentration. One drenches deep, saturates and suffuses one's body with the rapture and happiness born of concentration, so there is no part of one's body not filled with the rapture and happiness. Okay, so the thinking is supposed to all go away. I don't usually get it to all go away, except maybe if I'm on a really long retreat. Okay. But for most lay people learning the jhanas, the gaps between the thoughts get bigger. The thoughts are more like, yeah, okay, this is nicer. How long have I been here? How long should I stay here? I'm starting to lose it. Oops. That sort of thing, as opposed to, wow, this is too much. I don't think I want to stay here too long, or this is really cool. I'm going to tell so and so about it when I get out of my meditation period. Yeah, not that kind of thing. More gaps. It's getting quieter, and ideally, we get so quiet there is no thinking. The problem is the kind of instructions you're giving yourself about how to do this. Is that counted as vitakka thinking? Or is the vitakka only the discursive thinking where you're sort of going on and on? We don't know. But I'll say don't worry if there's some thinking as long as you can keep your attention focused on now the sukha, because the PT's in the background and the sukha is in the foreground. So you're focused on an emotional state. Unlike if you're following the breath, you're focused on a physical sensation. Unlike in the first jhana, where you're focused more on the PT or the PT sukha, which is going to feel more physical. Now you're focused on an emotional state. Maybe a little more difficult for some people, but that's the key thing. You want to be focused on, yeah, the emotional state of happiness. And it doesn't need to be extremely happy. In fact, if it gets too happy, the PT comes back up, right? So you're just being happy. It's like if this is the happiness, It's the focus that's strong, so you're not getting distracted. The problem is that the emotional state of happiness is far more subtle than the breath or the piti. I mean, the piti is not subtle at all. And so you now have a more subtle object to focus on. But the piti in sukha is born of concentration. The concentration developed by the first jhana hopefully gives you enough concentration to remain focused on the more subtle object of the sukha and piti of the second jhana, right? And so you're just sitting there being quite happy. The piti has not entirely gone away. I find in the second jhana I'm sort of rocking. Maybe there's a little swaying, something like that. In other words, it's not still, but it's not shaking. It's not a lot of heat or anything like that. And for me, the center of the experience has moved down to the heart center. It's like, well, it's like the sukha is just coming out of my heart. It doesn't feel like it's my whole body at first. When you've gotten really good at the second jhana, you could do the drench, steep, saturate, and suffuse again. But again, you first got to find it multiple times, get good at sustaining it. I would say for the second and higher jhanas, you want to learn to sustain them for at least 10 minutes, maybe even 15 minutes. Get in there and be able to stabilize that experience for an extended period. If it's not full body, after you've gotten to where you can stabilize it, then you can play with trying to move it, which is to put your attention where it feels the strongest, like the heart center. And again, move your attention to the other parts of the body, not trying to move the sukha, just move your attention and the sukha will follow along, and eventually your whole body is filled with sukha. We have a simile. Suppose there were a deep lake whose waters welled up from below. It would have no inlet for water from the east, west, north, or south, nor would it be refilled from time to time with showers of rain. And yet a current of cool water welling up from within the lake would drench, steep, saturate, and suffuse the whole lake, so there would be no part of that entire lake which is not suffused with the cool water. In the same way, one drenches, steeps, saturates, and suffuses one's body with the rapture and happiness born of concentration, so there is no part of one's body not suffused by rapture and happiness. Okay, so the picture is a lake, far up in the mountains, no streams coming in, not even any rain, but a spring at the bottom of the lake. And the water from the spring completely permeates the lake, totally fills the lake. This is an incredibly accurate picture of what the second jhana feels like. When I was first learning the jhanas, Ayakema was not reading out these similes. And so I'm back almost a year later for the next retreat, and she reads out the simile. And I was blown away by the simile of the second jhana. And after she left the meditation hall, I go running after her, Ayakema, Ayakema. It's just like that. It's just like that. I mean, I was so struck how completely accurately this simile captures the feeling of the second jhana. This is wellspring of happiness coming out of your heart for no reason other than you have a concentrated mind. Normally, we're out there looking for something to make us happy, right? Here, you're just happy because, well, you've learned to generate the neurotransmitters of happiness via concentration. This can be kind of an interesting learning experience. The happiness is not out there. The happiness is in here. What's out there is a trigger. And you find the trigger for generating the neurotransmitters. But you don't have to have the external triggers. You do have to have a concentrated mind, and you can then trigger your own happiness. this can be a valuable thing. All right. So as I say, you could stay in these states. 10, 15 minutes is good to learn to do that. You could stay in for longer than that. I've never stayed, I probably never stayed more than about 20, 25 minutes in the second jhana or any of the higher jhanas. It may run out. In other words, you have a finite amount of neurotransmitters ready to transmit to generate the happiness. And eventually, yeah, it sort of wanders away, which probably will dump you into the third jhana. Or you can move there on your own. And guess what? The way to move there, take another deep breath and let the energy out. Let things calm down even more. You want to let the PT calm down completely. It says here, with the fading away of rapture, one dwells in equanimity, mindful and clearly comprehending, and experiences happiness with the body. Thus one enters and dwells in the third jhana, of which the noble ones declare, one dwells happily with equanimity and mindfulness. One drenches deep, saturates, suffuses one's body with the happiness free from rapture, so there is no part of one's entire body not suffused by this happiness. Okay, so by definition, the PT is gone. It may fade away in that you've run out of the neurotransmitters that generate it. You're hanging out there in the second jhana, and the PT just disappears and everything calms down further. And that takes you to the third jhana. But it's good to learn how to move intentionally. Particularly if you're on a retreat learning the jhanas, you want to move intentionally because when you go home, you're not going to have as much concentration. And so sitting around and waiting till it moves on its own maybe is not going to be an option. But if you know how to move, yeah, you've been in second jhana for 10 minutes and it's like, okay, I'll go find the third jhana. You take the breath and the PTE hopefully goes completely away and the sukha calms down to not so much happiness as contentment, wishlessness, satisfaction. It's a state of satisfaction so profound that if Mick Jagger were to practice the third jhana, he wouldn't be able to sing that song. He would be satisfied. Okay? One thing I found that's helpful, right? I take the breath and the intensity level of the sukha, the happiness starts decreasing. And then I can remember an incident in my life where I was very contented and pluck the feeling of contentment out of that incident. And then my mind just settles into that. So it's a transition state, probably takes me, yeah, on retreat probably takes 2 or 3 seconds. At home might take more like 5 or 10 seconds before it settles. So you've got to have a brief memory of a contented experience. I don't know, you just eaten the perfect meal, you didn't overeat, and you don't have to wash the dishes, right? It's okay, so you remember the feeling of, right? And pluck from that feeling the contentment and focus on that feeling, and it'll stabilize. It says, one dwells in equanimity, mindful and clearly comprehending. Yeah, you're pretty much locked into this experience. You're aware this is a really good place to be. It doesn't have the agitation of the PT like the first and second jhana did. It's much more equanimous. It's still pleasant. Being contented is quite pleasant. All right, so it's not emotionally neutral, but again, you're focused on an emotional state, a positive emotional state. Most people say that like going from first to second is a dropping down of the center of the experience. Going from second to third is dropping down even further, like to the belly or something. I've had students come into an interview and they say, I was in second jhana and I went down. And I don't know whether they meant down numerically the first jhana or down kinesthetically to third jhana. It's the kinesthetic dropping is that obvious, really quite a feeling. One time I was doing meditation for science, and I showed up and they wanted to put me in an fMRI so they could look at my brain. And they wanted to tell me when to move between the jhanas. And they said, we'll tell you to go up or down. And I said, no, no, no. Up or down is not going to work. You're going to be thinking numerically, and I'm going to be thinking kinesthetically, and I'm going to be in two, and you're going to say, go up, and I'm going to go back to one when you meant for me to go to three. You can say previous and next, and that's what we did, and it worked out just fine. But the up and down really is quite striking as you go down through the first four jhanas. Again, it probably isn't encompassing your whole body. Put your attention where it feels the strongest, like maybe in the belly, and move your attention, not the contentment, just your attention to the other parts of your body, and you can feel it. But again, it's an advanced practice. It says one experiences happiness with the body. This is sometimes used by people who misunderstand what's piti and what's sukha. Since the piti's gone and there's happiness with the body, they think, oh, sukha must be about body. But no, there's happiness with the body because you've got tranquility now. The body has completely settled. That's where the happiness has come from. The sukha is an emotional state. The third jhana is an emotional state. Okay? As is the fourth. Right? It also says that one enters and dwells in the third jhana, of which the noble ones declare, one dwells happily with equanimity and mindfulness. The noble ones are those who are awakened, enlightened. So is the third jhana a taste of what enlightenment is like? You're happy with equanimity and mindfulness. Sounds pretty good to me. I don't know. I'm not fully awakened, so I cannot report back on this. So please work hard, get fully awakened, and let me know so I can upgrade my Dharma talk on the jhanas, all right? We have another simile. Suppose in a lotus pond there were blue, white, or red lotuses that had been born in the water, grow in the water, and never rise above the water, but flourish immersed in the water. From their tips to their roots, they would be drenched, steeped, saturated, and suffused with water, so there'd be no part of those lotuses not suffused with water. In the same way, one drenches, steeps, saturates, and suffuses one's body with a happiness free from rapture, so there is no part of one's entire body not suffused by this happiness. So we have a lotus pond, and lotus is coming up out of the mud, but not coming above the surface of the water. This is a very still picture. The lotuses aren't waving in the breeze. They're not bobbing up and down on the waves. They're underwater. Whatever's going on top is not affecting them. Right? So it's very still and it's somewhat isolated. By the time you get to the third jhana, the outside world hasn't disappeared, but it feels further away. And you're still aware of your body. Again, learn to stay there 10 to 15 minutes. Don't try and do the drenched, deep, saturated, suffuse until you're really good at the jhana. I mean, I learned all four jhanas before I ever heard about the drenched, deep, saturated, suffuse. And I don't often really make a big deal about it, just get through the four jhanas and then get on with my insight practice. But okay, so now you've got the third jhana going well. You've been there for a while, and you can move on to the fourth jhana. Further, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, and with the previous passing away of joy and grief, one enters and dwells in the fourth jhana, which is neither pleasant nor painful and contains mindfulness fully purified by equanimity. One sits suffusing one's body with a pure, bright mind, so there is no part of one's entire body not suffused by the pure, bright mind. Okay, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain and the previous passing away of joy and grief. This is not to say there was pain or grief in the previous jhanas, okay? This is pointing to an emotionally neutral state. There was joy in the first two, and there's pleasure still in the third because being contented is pleasant. So now what you're looking for is an emotionally neutral state. The words pleasure and pain, joy and grief are actually rhyming and have alliteration in them to make it easier as an oral tradition to remember what's going on. So I think it's not so much that these are dedicated instructions, it's just a hint. Yeah, get it to neutral. And you remember that because we gave you something so you can help with the alliteration and the rhyming. And then one dwells in the fourth jhana, which is neither pleasant nor painful. It's emotionally neutral, neither sukha nor dukkha, and contains mindfulness fully purified by equanimity. This is the highest quality of mindfulness, that is purified by equanimity. I looked up the number of occurrences of mindfulness in the suttas, 919 of them, kind of an important part of the Buddha's teachings, right? So yeah, you want to get the best kind of mindfulness, and it's the mindfulness that's purified by equanimity. It says one sits suffusing one's bodies with a pure, bright mind, so there is no part of one's entire body not suffused by a pure, bright mind. When I came and read that part out, I'd been practicing the fourth jhana for about a year. It was like, why does it say bright? Pure, I could see that. But why bright? It's black. There's no bright there. So my interview, I asked her about it. She said, describe your fourth jhana. I described it. She said, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Okay, I had to put that in the I don't know bucket for 16 years. There is a simile. Suppose a man were to be covered from the head down by a white cloth, so there would be no part of one's entire body not suffused by the white cloth. In the same way, one sits suffusing one's body with a pure, bright mind, so there's no part of one's entire body not suffused by a pure, bright mind. So the picture's pretty clear. Somebody's got a white sheet completely covering them. But why white? Why not black? I mean, I didn't get it. 16 years later, I was on retreat with Venerable Powok. Powok teaches the jhanas as found in the Visuddhimagga. I had been warned if I wanted to learn his jhanas, I needed to go on retreat for 6 months. And this was a 1-month retreat. So I didn't have any expectations, but I figured, okay, see what he's talking about. For Powok, what you got to do is you got to get a nimitta, a circle of light that's steady, white circle, like the moon or a searchlight shining in your face. Not the diffuse white light that I mentioned last week. That's on the way, but you got to get even more, the circle of light. He gave us the instruction that we should count our breaths between the in-breath and the out-breath, or actually between the out-breath and the in-breath. Breathe in, breathe out, and count 1. Stick it in the gap. Breathe in, breathe out 2, and only go to 8. And he said, when you can do that for 30 minutes without getting distracted, let me know. All right. So in a little while, I could do that. I let him know. He said, good. Drop the counting and continue to sit for 3 or 4 hours. 3 or 4 hours? I was on retreat at the forest refuge. So I decided to sit in my room because that way I could sit for an hour or 45, maybe before my body started bothering me, and then slide over into the bed, lie down for 20 minutes meditating, and slide back into the chair. That was the only way I was going to make 3 or 4 hours. One thing that started happening, I would get very intense PT, I mean violent shaking. And at the next interview, I told him, I didn't use the word PT, I'm getting this extreme shaking. He says, oh, that is gross PT, do not let that happen. Okay, gross PT, don't let it happen. Well, so As I mentioned last week, you can smile when you meditate, and that'll give you a pleasant sensation. So don't smile, keep a very solemn expression. Don't think a happy thought. And I found I could keep the PT at bay for like 3 or 4 hours. But sometimes, okay, I'd done his 3.5 hours, whatever, I would smile. And a violent PT would come and it would last about 10 seconds. I kind of worried my head was going to pop off. And then it would pass, and I would find myself in the second jhana, an amazingly stable second jhana. I have a break your face grin on my face. I can't turn it off. And I am, well, not deliriously happy, but that amount of happy. I wasn't delirious. I knew it was the second jhana, not his. This was Ayakema, what she had taught me, only it was much more intense, very stable. Cool. All right. So I stayed there for a while, did the drench. I didn't have to do the drench steep. I was dunked in a bath of sukha. I was completely underwater in sukha. It was great. And then it was like, oh, I wonder what the third jhana's like. Well, I took a breath and the PT comes back. I couldn't get to the third jhana because the PT kept coming. And then suddenly it felt like things went over the edge and everything calmed down. PT was gone and now I was contented. Third jhana, again, very stable. It was not going away. So after about 5 minutes, let's see the fourth jhana. I could not wipe the smile off my face. I had a little Buddha smile. First jhana, big grin, see the teeth. Second jhana, grin, no teeth. Third jhana, Buddha smile. It wouldn't relax it and it'd come right back. I relax it, it'd come right back. And then after another 5 or 10 minutes, it just sort of went over the edge again and dropped down to the fourth jhana. And when I got there, my visual field was bright white. Oh, just like the description of the jhana. This pointed out to me that the depth of concentration I had been experiencing was probably not that the Buddha and the monks were experiencing. I mean, after all, these people, they go on alms round, they get their food, they'd eat the midday meal, probably around 11 o'clock in the morning, and then they would go for the day's abiding. They go meditate someplace, go to the forest, sit at the root of a tree. I don't think they were doing 45-minute sit, 45-minute walk. These were people that grew up sitting cross-legged. They could sit there for 3 hours, right? Get super concentrated, stand up, walk around a little bit, sit down, do another 3 hours, right? So they were getting the fourth jhana with the bright white field. Now, you don't need 3 hours, but you do need a lot of time in access concentration before you trigger the jhanas. I can get there on retreat if I stay in access concentration for an hour or so, and then I can get the bright white field. But at home, or if I'm not staying that long, even when I'm on retreat, yeah, the fourth jhana is dark. When you take the breath to let go of the contentment to drop down to the fourth jhana, the dropping may go on for quite a while. Ayakema said the third jhana is like sitting in the mouth of a well. You're a little isolated from the world around you. To get to the fourth jhana, you need to let go and drop down the well. And you might ask, let go of what? Anything you're hanging on to, just let go and let it drop. The dropping is more like drifting down. It's not a free fall. It's more like drifting to the bottom of the swimming pool, which is another simile that might be helpful. Or in the third jhana, you're in the mouth of a cave, right? But the cave goes down if you go deeper into it. And there's definite feeling of going down, you get into the fourth jhana. When it settles, your focus is on quiet stillness. Although this is often called the jhana of equanimity. If I tell you focus on equanimity, that's a little bit nebulous. But if I tell you focus on quiet stillness, you will be focused on equanimity. And that's what you're aiming for jhana number 4. Don't worry if it's black. Okay, it was black for me for 16 years, right? And then I found a way to make it white, but I don't do that much. I just get concentrated. so that I have mindfulness fully purified by equanimity, which is the whole purpose. But what follows next in this sutta is, when one's mind is thus concentrated, pure and bright, unblemished, free from defects, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, one directs and inclines it to knowing and seeing. One understands thus: this is my body, having material form, composed of the four great elements, originating from mother and father, built up out of rice and gruel, impermanent, subject to rubbing and pressing, to dissolution and dispersion. And this is my consciousness, supported by it and bound up with it. The purpose of the jhanas is to generate a mind that's concentrated, pure and bright, unblemished, free from defects, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attain to imperturbability, which you direct and incline to knowing and seeing. Knowing and seeing what? This body and this mind. Are you familiar with the Satipatthana Sutta, the discourse on the four foundations of mindfulness? First foundation, body. Second foundation, Vedana. Oh, that's part of mind. Third foundation, mind states. Oh, that's part of mind. Fourth foundation, dhammas, phenomena. Mostly it's mental phenomena. That's part of mind, except for the parts that are body, right? So basically, the jhanas are a warm-up exercise for insight practice. A good collection of insight practices to choose from is the Satipatthana Suttas, right? But there are other practices, the 5 daily recollections, lots of other insight practices, whatever you think of when you think of doing vipassana. If you do it with a jhanically concentrated mind, it will give you more insights. The purpose of the jhanas is to sharpen your mind. So my computer's sitting on a wooden table. If I had a butter knife and I wanted to cut the table in two, it's going to be really hard. Okay, I can make a little dent right away, but to cut a wooden table in two with a butter knife, a lot of work. It'd go much faster if I got a whetstone and sharpened up that butter knife, right? I'd make up all the time I lost with the sharpening by having a sharper knife. This is what jhana practice is about. It's sharpening your mind. In the Tibetan tradition, the bodhisattva of wisdom is Manjushri, who has a sword in his hand which he uses to cut the bonds of ignorance. Jhana practice is just sharpening Manjushri's sword. But you don't want to make the mistake of just sharpening, because eventually you got no sword and you didn't learn anything. You sharpen up your mind and then you do insight practice. When you're skilled at it, you spend about half the time sharpening your mind by stepping through the jhanas, and then half the time doing insight practice. And I can guarantee you'll get more insights in the half time than if you spent the whole time doing insight practice, just like you'll cut faster with a sharp knife than a dull one. So this is the 4 jhanas.